started with a single phone call that echoed through palace corridors like a warning bell. Within hours, senior aides were rushing between offices, security teams were repositioned, and Prince William was nowhere to be seen. What happened inside that private meeting with King Charles was so shocking that even veteran royal staff struggled to believe it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the sudden activity was dismissed as routine royal business. After all, private meetings between the king and the heir to the throne were hardly unusual. Yet something about this gathering felt different. The atmosphere surrounding it carried a weight that even the most experienced palace insiders could not ignore. Reports began circulating that King Charles had personally requested Prince William's immediate presence, canceling previously scheduled commitments and instructing senior officials to assemble without delay. Those closest to the situation allegedly noticed an urgency rarely seen within the carefully controlled machinery of the monarchy. Conversations became shorter. Doors remained closed longer. Faces that normally revealed nothing suddenly appeared tense and distracted. As the hours passed, whispers started spreading through royal residences. Staff members who were accustomed to maintaining perfect composure found themselves exchanging concerned glances. No official explanation was offered, but rumors quickly pointed toward a major decision involving Queen Camilla. Nobody seemed willing to discuss details openly, yet everyone appeared aware that something significant was unfolding behind closed doors. The uncertainty only intensified when additional palace officials were quietly summoned to join discussions. The move raised immediate questions. Why involve so many senior figures unless the matter carried enormous consequences for the future of the institution itself? Prince William reportedly arrived expecting what many assumed would be a routine conversation about succession planning and upcoming royal responsibilities. The king had been facing increasing pressures regarding the long-term future of the monarchy, making such discussions perfectly reasonable. Yet according to growing speculation from palace circles, the meeting took a dramatic turn almost immediately. Whatever Charles revealed was not something William had anticipated. Witnesses later described a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The calm formality that usually defined royal discussions seemed to disappear, replaced by a silence so heavy that it left an impression on everyone connected to the gathering. As details slowly filtered outward, reports emerged suggesting that William appeared visibly overwhelmed by the announcement. Those claims remain impossible to fully verify, but they spread with remarkable speed throughout royal circles. Some insiders insisted the future king struggled to process what he had just heard. Others claimed the implications reached far beyond a simple adjustment of duties or titles. What united nearly every version of the story was the belief that Charles had made a decision capable of reshaping relationships at the very highest levels of the monarchy. And as speculation continued to grow, one troubling question lingered above all others. What could possibly be important enough to trigger such an extraordinary reaction from a man long trained to withstand pressure, scrutiny, and crisis? But the decision that shook William wasn't created overnight. It had been building behind palace walls for months. For months, King Charles had been carrying a burden few understood. As questions about the future of the monarchy intensified, he found himself trapped between loyalty, duty, and legacy. Then came the moment when delaying the decision was no longer possible. The shock that rippled through palace corridors after William's reported reaction did not emerge from a single conversation. It was the result of months of uncertainty, private debates, and increasingly difficult questions that had been gathering momentum behind closed doors. Long before that urgent meeting took place, King Charles had reportedly become consumed by concerns about the future direction of the crown. The monarchy was entering a period unlike any it had faced in decades. Public expectations were changing. Generational transitions were approaching. Every decision carried consequences that stretched far beyond the present moment. While the public often saw ceremonial appearances and carefully crafted statements, insiders claimed the king was spending more time examining what kind of institution he would ultimately leave behind. At the center of many of those discussions was Queen Camilla's long-term role within the monarchy. For years, her position had evolved alongside Charles's journey to the throne. Yet as conversations increasingly shifted toward the next era of royal leadership, difficult questions reportedly began surfacing. What would Camilla's role look like in the years ahead? How would her influence fit within future plans centered on William and Catherine? And perhaps most importantly, How could those decisions be made without creating fresh divisions inside a family already carrying the weight of past conflicts? These were not simple questions, and according to palace sources, there were no easy answers. As the pressure intensified, competing visions for the future reportedly emerged among advisors. Some believed continuity was essential, arguing that stability required maintaining established structures for as long as possible. Others viewed the coming transition as an opportunity to redefine the monarchy for a new generation. Every recommendation carried risks. Every proposal seemed to create new complications. The king found himself balancing personal relationships against institutional responsibilities, knowing that any choice would inevitably disappoint someone. The challenge was not merely political, it was deeply personal. Duty demanded one course of action. Loyalty seemed to demand another. Meanwhile, senior members of the royal household were allegedly becoming increasingly vocal about the need for clarity. Succession planning could not remain uncertain forever. The closer the monarchy moved toward its next chapter, the more urgent those conversations became. Reports suggested that Charles began privately reviewing constitutional responsibilities, historical precedents, and long-term frameworks that could guide future decisions. The process was said to be exhaustive. Every possibility was examined. Every consequence weighed carefully. Yet, the more deeply the king explored the issue, the more unavoidable the final decision appeared to become. Outside palace walls, scrutiny was growing as well. Public discussion about the monarchy's future became increasingly intense. Commentators speculated endlessly about succession, influence, and the balance of power within the royal family. Questions that once seemed distant suddenly felt immediate. The pressure from within the institution and beyond it appeared to be converging toward a single unavoidable moment. Then, after months of deliberation, hesitation, and internal struggle, the recommendation finally reached the king's desk. It represented more than a proposal. It represented a crossroads. Accepting it would alter relationships, expectations, and perhaps even the future shape of the monarchy itself. Rejecting it would only postpone a reckoning that many believed was already overdue. Charles understood that whatever choice he made would echo far beyond the walls of any palace meeting room. And when his final decision eventually came, its consequences would prove far greater than anyone imagined. What Charles ultimately approved would trigger a chain reaction no one inside the palace could fully control. The room reportedly fell silent. No interruptions, no objections. Just a stunned pause as Charles delivered the words that changed everything. William had prepared for many possibilities, but not this one. By the time the final recommendation reached the king's desk, the atmosphere surrounding the issue had already become heavy with expectation. Months of speculation, private consultations, and carefully guarded discussions had all led to this single moment. According to accounts that later circulated among royal insiders, Charles did not rush through the announcement. The significance of what he was about to reveal demanded complete attention. This was not a routine administrative adjustment or a minor update to royal responsibilities. It was a decision with the potential to reshape relationships, redefine influence, and alter assumptions that many within the institution had carried for years. As Charles began outlining Camilla's future position within the monarchy, those present reportedly understood almost immediately that they were witnessing a turning point. The details were said to be far more extensive than many had anticipated. What had once seemed like distant succession planning was suddenly becoming immediate reality. Questions that had lingered quietly in the background were now being addressed directly. How would authority be distributed in the years ahead? What role would Camilla play as the monarchy entered a new era? And perhaps most importantly, where would those decisions leave the future king himself? As fragments of the discussion allegedly began filtering through palace circles, a picture started to emerge. The decision appeared designed to provide long-term clarity, but clarity often comes at a cost. Every solution creates new tensions. Every answer raises new questions. Those who had expected a carefully balanced compromise instead found themselves confronting a plan that seemed far more decisive than anyone had predicted. The implications stretched beyond titles and responsibilities. They touched the very structure of future royal influence. What truly intensified the drama, however, was the reaction reportedly displayed by Prince William. For years, he had built a reputation for discipline, patience, and composure under extraordinary pressure. He had weathered public scrutiny, family controversies, and the enormous expectations attached to his future role. Yet according to whispers that spread rapidly through royal circles, this announcement affected him differently. Witnesses allegedly described an emotional response that caught even experienced aides by surprise. Not because William was incapable of strong feelings, but because he had spent much of his life mastering the ability to conceal them. As the significance of Charles's words settled over the room, senior officials reportedly exchanged uneasy glances. No one interrupted. No one challenged the king directly. Yet the silence itself became meaningful, reflected the understanding that everyone present had grasped the scale of what was unfolding. Some reportedly focused on the immediate consequences. Others appeared concerned about the long-term impact. All understood that the decision would not remain confined to a private discussion for long. Soon, questions began spreading through the institution. How much authority would this arrangement grant? Would it strengthen stability or create future tensions? Was this purely Charles's vision, or part of a broader strategy for the monarchy's next chapter? The more people learned, the more complicated the situation appeared. What initially seemed like a straightforward announcement was quickly revealing layers of political, personal, and institutional significance. Those closest to the meeting later described an atmosphere bordering on disbelief, not because the possibility had never been discussed, but because the reality felt far more consequential than the rumors that had preceded it. The gravity of the king's announcement became impossible to ignore. Yet, even as attention focused on William's reaction and the extraordinary nature of the decision itself, a deeper mystery was beginning to emerge. Because if this outcome had been months in the making, who had influenced it, who had supported it, and what other conversations had taken place beyond public view? Yet the shock surrounding William's reaction only fueled deeper questions about what was happening behind the scenes. Whenever a major royal decision is made, there are winners and losers. But this time, the divisions appeared sharper than anyone expected. Quiet alliances began forming almost immediately. The questions triggered by Charles's announcement did not remain confined to a single meeting room for very long. As word of the decision quietly spread through royal circles, a new phase of the drama began to unfold. What had started as a private conversation between a king and his heir was rapidly evolving into something much larger. The issue was no longer simply about the future role of Camilla. It was becoming a test of loyalty, influence, and competing visions for the monarchy itself. Behind the carefully maintained image of unity, fault lines that had existed for years suddenly appeared closer to the surface than ever before. Among senior courtiers, opinions reportedly began separating into distinct camps. Some viewed Charles's decision as a necessary step toward stability. They argued that uncertainty had lingered for too long, and that clarity was essential if the institution hoped to navigate the challenges waiting ahead. Others were far less convinced. According to palace whispers, concerns emerged about timing, authority, and the long-term consequences that could follow. The same decision that some saw as strategic was viewed by others as potentially disruptive. Every discussion seemed to produce new disagreements, and every disagreement revealed just how divided opinion had become. At the center of much of that tension stood Prince William. Reports suggested that several figures within the royal household privately shared concerns about what the king's announcement could mean for the future balance of influence inside the monarchy. While few were willing to challenge Charles openly, there were growing indications that not everyone was comfortable with the direction events appeared to be taking. Supporters of William allegedly worried about the message being sent at a moment when preparations for the next generation of royal leadership were becoming increasingly important. Their concerns were rarely expressed publicly, but behind closed doors they reportedly became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, those viewed as sympathetic to Camilla interpreted the situation very differently. To them, the king's decision represented recognition of years of loyalty, service, and support. They believed the announcement provided certainty where confusion had existed. In their eyes, criticism of the decision seemed unfair and, in some cases, politically motivated. As both perspectives gained momentum, the gap between them appeared to widen. What had once been quiet differences of opinion were gradually transforming into deeper disagreements about the future identity of the monarchy. For palace staff, the atmosphere reportedly became increasingly difficult to navigate. Employees whose responsibilities depended upon discretion suddenly found themselves operating within an environment filled with uncertainty. Every conversation seemed to carry hidden meaning. Every development generated fresh speculation. The challenge was not simply understanding what had happened. It was understanding what might happen next. That uncertainty became a source of tension in itself. As debate intensified, comparisons to past royal conflicts inevitably began emerging. Some observers pointed to previous moments when questions of influence and succession had divided the institution. Others saw echoes of family struggles that had shaped earlier chapters of royal history. Whether those comparisons were accurate hardly mattered. Their existence reflected a growing belief that the monarchy might be approaching another defining crossroads. With every passing day, speculation expanded. Would the decision strengthen the institution or create lasting divisions? Would relationships recover, or would hidden resentments continue to grow beneath the surface? No one seemed entirely certain. What everyone agreed upon, however, was that the consequences had not yet fully revealed themselves. The announcement had answered some questions, but it had created many more. And as attention increasingly shifted toward the future, one figure remained at the center of every discussion, every disagreement, and every theory emerging from behind palace walls. As tensions rose behind closed doors, attention increasingly shifted toward the person at the center of it all. For years, Camilla had endured criticism, scrutiny, and controversy. Yet, nothing could have prepared her for becoming the focal point of a decision powerful enough to shake the future king himself. As palace tensions continued to grow, and competing factions quietly formed around Charles's announcement, attention increasingly converged on a single figure. Whether supporters viewed her as a stabilizing presence or critics saw her as a source of controversy, there was no escaping the reality that Camilla now stood at the center of the storm. The decision that had reportedly stunned William was no longer being discussed solely in terms of succession planning or institutional strategy. It had become deeply personal. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same question. What would this mean for Camilla's future role within the monarchy? According to palace whispers, the full implications of the king's decision gradually became clearer in the days that followed. What initially appeared to be a straightforward clarification of responsibilities began revealing deeper consequences. Influence, visibility, authority, and long-term positioning within the royal structure were all reportedly affected by the framework Charles had proved. For Camilla, this was not simply about titles or ceremonial duties. It was about understanding where she would fit within a future increasingly focused on William and Catherine. That realization allegedly carried enormous emotional weight, particularly after years spent navigating one of the most difficult public journeys in modern royal history. Outside palace walls, public attention intensified at remarkable speed. News organizations, commentators, and royal observers began dissecting every rumor, every report, and every alleged detail emerging from behind closed doors. The story seemed to grow larger with each passing day. What had begun as a private royal matter was transforming into a national conversation about influence, legacy, and the future direction of the crown. The spotlight that had followed Camilla for decades suddenly became even brighter. Every appearance, every statement, and every absence invited fresh speculation. Inside royal circles, reactions were reportedly being monitored with extraordinary care. Palace insiders understood that perception could become just as important as reality. Small developments generated outsized attention. Minor details became subjects of major discussion. Those closest to the institution were allegedly watching not only how the public responded, but also how senior members of the royal family adapted to the new landscape created by Charles's decision. Every gesture seemed to carry significance. Every interaction appeared open to interpretation. At the same time, difficult questions about future influence continued to surface. Would Camilla maintain the same level of prominence moving forward? Would her position evolve alongside broader plans for the monarchy's next generation? Or was this decision quietly signaling a gradual shift in power toward a different era of royal leadership? The absence of clear answers only fueled more debate. Uncertainty became its own source of tension. As discussion intensified, historic controversies and old challenges inevitably resurfaced. Public memories are rarely as short as institutions hope, and many observers found themselves revisiting earlier chapters of Camilla's journey. Stories that had once faded into the background returned to public conversation. Past struggles, old criticisms, and long-standing divisions were suddenly being viewed through the lens of current events. The contrast was striking. Years spent building stability now appeared overshadowed by fresh uncertainty. The pressure extended beyond public perception. Family relationships reportedly faced renewed strain as differing opinions collided with personal loyalties. Individuals who had worked hard to maintain fragile balances suddenly found themselves navigating new complexities. Every decision seemed to create additional questions. Every attempt at clarity appeared to reveal another layer of uncertainty. And through it all, the spotlight became impossible to escape. Camilla remained at the center of every headline, every rumor, and every debate surrounding the monarchy's future. Yet while attention focused intensely on her role and her reaction, another struggle was quietly taking shape elsewhere. A larger conflict was beginning to emerge, one that reached beyond any single individual, threatened to define the future of the institution itself. But while headlines focused on Camilla, another battle was quietly unfolding around the monarchy's future. Every generation of the royal family faces a defining moment. For Charles and William, this appeared to be one of them. The issue was no longer one individual, it was the future shape of the institution itself. As the intense focus on Camilla continued to dominate headlines and fuel endless speculation, a deeper and far more consequential debate was quietly taking shape behind palace walls. The conversation was no longer centered solely on personalities, relationships, or individual positions. It had evolved into something much larger. At stake was the identity of the monarchy itself. The questions confronting King Charles and Prince William were not temporary challenges that could be postponed indefinitely. They touched the very foundation of what the institution would become in the decades ahead. And as pressure mounted from every direction, the contrast between competing visions for the future became increasingly difficult to ignore. At the heart of the discussion was a growing divide between tradition and modernization. Some believed the monarchy's survival depended on preserving long-established structures, customs, and relationships. They argued that continuity provided stability, especially during periods of uncertainty. Others saw the future differently. They believed adaptation was essential. Public expectations had changed. Society had changed. The monarchy, they argued, could not rely solely on traditions if it hoped to maintain relevance in a rapidly evolving world. These competing philosophies created a tension that stretched far beyond any single decision. Every debate about roles, responsibilities, and influence became part of a larger struggle over what kind of institution the crown would ultimately become. Public perception added another layer of complexity. Palace advisors reportedly understood that every decision would be judged not only by history, but also by a modern audience that expected transparency, accountability, and clear purpose. The monarchy's strength had always rested on public confidence. Protecting that confidence required careful balance. A decision viewed as too rigid risked appearing outdated. A decision viewed as too radical risked alienating those who valued continuity. Navigating that narrow path became one of the greatest challenges facing the institution. As these debates intensified, comparisons between Charles's approach and William's emerging vision became unavoidable. While both men shared a commitment to preserving the monarchy, reports suggested they sometimes differed in how that goal should be achieved. Charles was often seen as someone deeply connected to the traditions and responsibilities he had spent a lifetime preparing to inherit. William, meanwhile, represented the future. His perspective was shaped by a different generation, different challenges, and different expectations. Neither vision was inherently right or wrong. Yet the differences between them highlighted the difficult choices confronting the crown. Historical precedents were reportedly examined with growing urgency. Advisors looked back at earlier periods when monarchies faced moments of transformation. They studied decisions that strengthened institutions and mistakes that weakened them. Lessons from the past suddenly felt remarkably relevant. History offered guidance, but it also served as a warning. The wrong decision could create consequences that lasted for years. The right one could secure stability for generations. Meanwhile, discussions about long-term sustainability became increasingly serious. Senior figures reportedly debated not just immediate outcomes, but the future health of the monarchy itself. What structure would best serve the institution moving forward? How could unity be maintained during a period of transition? And what sacrifices might be necessary to ensure long-term success? These questions carried enormous weight because the answers would shape far more than the present moment. Pressure continued building from all sides. Public scrutiny intensified. Internal disagreements persisted. Expectations grew heavier. Gradually, the focus shifted away from individual reactions and toward a single overriding concern: protecting the future of the crown. The stakes had become impossible to ignore. Yet, just as it seemed the contours of the struggle were finally becoming clear, new information began surfacing that threatened to change everything once again. Then came a revelation that made the original decision seem even more significant. The public saw only the outcome. What they didn't see were the countless meetings, private briefings, and difficult conversations that helped shape the king's final choice. The revelation that emerged in the aftermath of Charles's decision did not arrive through a single leak or dramatic disclosure. Instead, it surfaced gradually, piece by piece, as fragments of previously hidden discussions began finding their way into royal conversations. The public had witnessed the reaction. They had seen the controversy. They had followed the speculation. What remained concealed, however, was the long and complicated process that had unfolded behind closed doors before the decision was ever announced. As more information reportedly began to surface, it became clear that the path leading to that moment was far more intricate than anyone had originally imagined. According to sources familiar with palace operations, the king's final choice had been shaped by months of confidential consultations involving some of the most trusted figures within the royal institution. These were not casual conversations. They were serious examinations of the monarchy's future, conducted under extraordinary levels of discretion. Advisors reportedly reviewed multiple scenarios, evaluated potential outcomes, and explored how different decisions might affect both public confidence and long-term stability. What appeared from the outside to be a sudden announcement was, in reality, the culmination of a lengthy process that had unfolded almost entirely beyond public view. As details continued emerging, attention increasingly turned toward the recommendations that had reached Charles during those private deliberations. While the exact contents remained closely guarded, reports suggested that several competing viewpoints had been presented. Some advisors emphasized continuity and caution. Others reportedly encouraged bolder action designed to prepare the monarchy for future challenges. The recommendations did not simply address present circumstances. They focused on decades ahead. Every possibility was examined through the lens of legacy, succession, and institutional survival. Perhaps even more significant were claims that long-term succession planning had played a far greater role than many initially realized. The decision was allegedly connected to broader discussions about how the monarchy would function after Charles's reign. Questions about leadership, influence, public expectations, and generational transition reportedly shaped much of the conversation. Viewed from that perspective, the king's announcement was no longer merely about one individual. It was part of a larger strategy intended to guide the institution through a period of profound change. For Prince William, these revelations reportedly provided a deeper understanding of the reasoning behind his father's decision. While his initial reaction had become the subject of widespread discussion, those familiar with later developments suggested that additional context gradually altered how the situation was viewed. The more details that emerged, the more apparent it became that Charles had been weighing responsibilities extending far beyond personal relationships. His decision reflected not only immediate concerns, but also a vision of where the monarchy needed to go in the future. As the broader strategy became clearer, many of the previously confusing elements began falling into place. Actions that once appeared controversial suddenly carried a different significance when viewed within the context of long-term planning. Hidden considerations, institutional priorities, and future objectives all contributed to a more complete picture. The controversy had never been solely about Camilla. It had always been intertwined with questions about succession, continuity, and the crown's long-term survival. Yet even as these hidden factors helped explain the decision, they also reinforced its importance. The deeper people looked, the larger the story seemed to become. What had initially appeared to be a single royal controversy was revealed as part of a much broader transformation unfolding inside the monarchy. And as understanding gradually replaced speculation, one unavoidable truth emerged. Regardless of where opinions fell, the institution had already crossed a threshold from which there could be no easy return. And as the dust finally began to settle, the monarchy faced a new reality that could not be undone. The collapse, the controversy, and the palace turmoil were only the beginning. The real story was what came next, and how one decision would reshape relationships inside the royal family for years to come. In the weeks that followed, the initial shock gradually gave way to a new and far more complicated reality. The headlines continued. The speculation persisted. The debates showed no sign of disappearing. Yet behind all the public discussion, the royal family found itself facing the difficult task of moving forward. The decision had been made. The consequences were already unfolding. And regardless of how anyone felt about the outcome, there was no returning to the moment before everything changed. The monarchy now stood in unfamiliar territory, forced to adapt to circumstances that had transformed almost overnight. For Prince William, the adjustment was neither immediate nor simple. Reports suggested that the future king spent considerable time reflecting on the broader implications of what had occurred. The emotion surrounding the announcement may have faded, but the significance remained. He understood that personal feelings could never outweigh institutional responsibilities. That had always been part of royal life. Yet understanding a reality and accepting it are often two very different things. As the days passed, William reportedly began shifting his focus away from the shock of the decision itself and toward the challenges that lay ahead. The future would not be shaped by reaction alone. It would be shaped by how leaders responded when faced with uncertainty. Meanwhile, King Charles remained firm. Despite the controversy, despite the criticism, and despite the divisions that had surfaced, there were no indications that he intended to reverse course. Those closest to the situations described a monarch who believed he had acted according to what he felt was necessary for the institution's long-term stability. The burden of leadership often requires choices that satisfy no one completely. Charles appeared to understand that reality better than most. The decision had come at a personal cost, but he seemed prepared to carry that weight if he believed it served a greater purpose. For Camilla, an entirely new chapter was beginning. The months and years ahead would almost certainly look different from what many had once expected. Whether viewed through the lens of opportunity or challenge, her role was entering unfamiliar territory. The intense scrutiny surrounding her position showed little sign of fading. Yet throughout her public life, she had repeatedly faced situations that seemed impossible to navigate. Once again, she found herself confronting uncertainty while the world watched closely. Inside palace walls, staff worked tirelessly to restore a sense of normalcy. Stability had always been one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. Maintaining that stability after such a significant development required careful coordination and extraordinary discipline. Officials understood that public confidence depended upon continuity. While debates continued outside, the institution itself had to keep functioning. Duties remained. Responsibilities continued. The crown could not afford to stand still. Public reactions also continued evolving. Some viewed the decision as necessary and forward-thinking. Others remained deeply skeptical. Supporters and critics alike searched for signs of what might come next. Every appearance, every statement, and every development became part of a larger conversation about the monarchy's future direction. The story was no longer confined to a single announcement. It had become a reflection of broader questions about leadership, succession, and change. As time moved forward, one truth became increasingly clear. The monarchy was adapting. It had survived crises before. It had endured controversies, transitions, and periods of uncertainty throughout its long history. This challenge was significant, but it was not unprecedented. The institution would continue evolving, just as it always had. Yet despite all the adjustments, all the explanations, and all the attempts to restore equilibrium, important questions remained unanswered. What would the next chapter bring? How would relationships continue to evolve? And would history ultimately judge this decision as a turning point for better or worse? Those answers remain hidden beyond the horizon. For now, only one certainty exists. The story did not end with Charles's announcement. It merely entered a new phase, one that will continue shaping the future of the royal family for years to come. Because in the House of Windsor, the biggest royal battles rarely end when the decision is announced. They begin there. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.